Thank you, David. It's with great pleasure that I'm introducing to you Ian Hutton, who many of you will know. Ian Hutton has been involved in the study and conservation of nature on Lord Howe Island for most of his life. He's a prolific wildlife photographer, both above and below the waterline, and his photos have been used in many books and articles he's written over the years. He was appointed in 2002 as the part-time curator of the Lord Howe Island Museum, where he gives weekly lectures. He's been involved in initiating and supporting major conservation projects and studies on the island, including weed eradication, studies of climate change, and of course, rodent eradication. Over to you, Ian, if you're able to share us your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so there we go. That one. That one. That one. Sorry about this. We'll get there. Okay, so now I think we go there. Are we on air?
You are. Good on you.
Excellent. Okay, well, first, thank you to Barry and BirdLife Southern Southern New South Wales for inviting me to speak at this forum, and we've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to zoom through these images. There are headings that sort of talk about it. Lord Howe Island is Australia's greatest seabird island. 14 different species of seabirds are breeding here, and we also have 18 land bird species breeding here. And that includes the woodhen, Lord Howe Island's flightless bird, which has received a lot of attention over the last 40 or 50 years, having been rescued from the brink of extinction. Lord Howe Island was one of the last islands in the world that humans found, and very early on there was great scientific interest in the island. Just a few months after the island was discovered, a surgeon on board one of the First Fleet ships made some drawings of the white gallinule bird, which did go extinct by about the year 1800 due to sailors shooting them for food. The whaling industry was quite big in the southwest Pacific Ocean from 1800 onwards, and sailors came into Lord Howe Island looking for food, and well, the birds were it. And they did shoot the white-throated pigeon into extinction, probably gone by the 1850s. Settlement came in 1834. A couple of small families came to set up a provisioning station here to provide food for the visiting whaling ships, and they were growing a great range of food crops, and they had to survive on those food crops. And we had a little red-crowned parakeet living on the island eating rainforest fruits, but the garden crops were tastier. The birds would raid the gardens, so the islanders shot that one, 1869, last seen. And over the ensuing decades, humans did bring a lot of animals onto the island for their everyday needs and survival, or accidental, and these have had an impact on the bird life. Rats got ashore in 1918 from a ship wrecked Macambo, and the government introduced masked owls and barn owls in the 1920s to control the rats. But both of these introductions did have a big impact on the bird life. By the 1930s, there were 5 land birds that had become extinct due to predation by the owls and the rats. And also the big introduced owls pushed our little boobook owl into extinction in the 1950s. So overall, there are 9 different land birds that are missing from Lord Howe Island, perhaps a bit of a dark tale in birds of Australia. Also, predation by rats and owls pushed 2 seabirds off the island. The white-bellied storm petrels and Kermadec petrels had been recorded breeding on the island in 1915, but by 1936, when Keith Hindwood visited, they had gone. Also, forest clearing on the island provided new habitats, and we have had quite a number of land birds colonise Lord Howe Island in the last 100 years, going into these new habitats. So they have arrived. Focus on bird conservation began with research into the woodhen's dilemma in the 1970s. So John Disney, Peter Fulliger were involved in this research, and it was realised the introduced animals were a big problem for the woodhens. So the woodhen rescue began with the removal of some of these feral animals. The cats, feral cats removed, feral pigs removed, domestic cats banned, and dogs strictly controlled. So that made the island environment safe for the woodhens, but it was decided to breed them up quickly with a captive breeding project to increase their numbers quickly. Very successful, 93 woodhens raised and released due to the dedication of Glenn Fraser, aviculturist from New Zealand. And within 5 years, the woodhen numbers had gone from a low of about 20, estimated in the 1970s, up to 200. Getting rid of the cats did have other benefits. These two seabirds, the black noddies, the little shearwaters, I found breeding back on the island for the first time in 1990, no doubt due to cats being removed. And then a bit of a focus turned on rats. Rats were doing a huge amount of damage to the whole of the flora and fauna of Lord Howe Island. They were eating plants, seeds and fruits, insects, snails, and of course impacting the birds. In the 1980s, the New Zealand Department of Conservation began removing rats off islands, and each year going to bigger and bigger islands, developing techniques. 2004, they used a helicopter in an island eradication on Campbell Island, and that set a great benchmark. And using all the experience and knowledge from New Zealand, the plan was drawn up to remove rats from Lord Howe Island in 2019, and it was a success. And the method that was used was helicopters carrying a large bucket with bait pellets in. The helicopters flew in all of the areas away from the settlement, so the mountains, the North Hills, wherever it could be done safely using the helicopter. So the bulk of the island was covered that way, but in the settlement area, bait stations had to be used because people living in the settlement and they're collecting rainwater, so couldn't put poison pellets on the roofs, but that was a big project. 19,500 bait stations and some hand broadcasting of baits were used. And with that project, the chemical used in the eradication was called Brodificum, and it may have killed some woodhens and currawongs on the island. So during the rat eradication, Taronga Zoo had been on the island, built special pens here on the island, and for about 14 months, Taronga Zoo had 6 staff here to look after 120 currawongs and 230 woodhens so that the bait could be distributed and those birds not impacted. Following the project, woodhens that were caught for captivity, which was pretty much every woodhen, they were released and they started breeding very quickly. And it surprised everybody because within 6 months of that project success, the woodhen numbers had doubled from 200 up to 440, and a survey completed in 2024 showed well over 2,000 woodhens. So that's a phenomenal increase in woodhen numbers because the rats were eating the woodhen's food. Each rat eats 15 grams of food a day, and we had 120,000 rats. So now the food is there for woodhens and all the other birds. The introduced owls had to be removed because without rats they would only eat more birds. So introduced owls were removed in 2019, and the small black-winged petrels have probably trebled in numbers in 5 years without predation by owls. So that's been a big winner in that project. And it is expected that there are going to be big changes, and one of those exciting changes we did see in January of 2025, a tourist found and photographed a Kermadec petrel on the Goat House track. So that could mean that the Kermadec petrels have come back to start breeding on the island again. which is very exciting. And in 2023, Liam Murphy on Lord Howe Island discovered little grass birds recording breeding on the island. They did again breed in 2024, so that's the first new land bird to breed on Lord Howe Island for about 30 years, no doubt due to the rats being removed. The future of a rat-free island, very exciting. Around the Tasman Sea, there are land masses like Australia, New Zealand, New Caledonia, Norfolk Island that have got very similar subspecies of birds to the ones that were lost from Lord Howe Island. Norfolk Island in particular has a number of birds that are very close to our lost ones. And two of those birds in particular, the Norfolk Island boobook owl and their parakeet, they're threatened species there because of impacts of feral animals on Norfolk. So they would be highly desirable ones to look at bringing back to Lord Howe Island to conserve that species and replace our lost ones. There is a program mooted to reintroduce the Lord Howe Island phasmid, a big flightless stick insect. It was exterminated by rats, thought to be extinct by 1930, but rediscovered on Ball's Pyramid nearby by rock climbers in 1964. And Melbourne Zoo are breeding these, and there will be a program to put the phasmids back on Lord Howe Island. But the owl that we had, our Lord Howe boobook owl, may have been a predator on the phasmids, and it may have been just keeping the phasmid numbers in check. So it may be that very highly desirable to bring back the boobook from Norfolk Island just to be part of that phasmid release program. Should other land birds be reintroduced, there probably would be a lot of benefit to do this and restore the Lord Howe Island ecosystems, because some of the birds that we lost may well have been essential in the ecosystem. For example, we lost a big pigeon, and that bird may have been distributing seeds of some of our large seeded plants on the island that don't have that animal to move the seeds around now, so essential for the ecosystem. But this would be need to be done very carefully, and it may take many years of research for it to be done safely and without unintended consequences. There is a need to engage the Lord Howe Island community in the discussion and decision making now, and to be involved in all phases of this as it proceeds. Would also need to investigate land masses around the Tasman Sea to determine which birds might be the most suitable, whether that's through genetics or living in ecosystems close to Lord Howe Island ecosystems. And certainly probably would be easier to include birds selected from Australian regions rather than New Zealand or New Caledonia, because of environmental laws of bringing things into Australia and even exporting them from other countries. Probably would be desirable to involve the IUCN Island Conservation Group, a group of specialists from around the world, and this is to ensure that the best expertise from around the world is part of this project. And certainly from the rat eradication that took place at Lord Howe Island, the community do have a lot of respect for and confidence in the expertise of people from New Zealand. It will be complex. For example, what impact will the new colonising birds that got here in the last 100 years have on our on the reintroduced birds? Will there be competition? Could there be predation? Will some of these recent birds that colonised need to be removed? And that's quite possible for birds like the blackbird and thrush that would take up a similar niche to the birds that we're talking about reintroducing. Probably for each species it's necessary to consider what role that species played in the Lord Howe Island ecosystems. What impacts could that species have on other birds and animals on Lord Howe Island if it was reintroduced? And which would be the most desirable species or subspecies to return? The ones with closest genetics, or the ones that come from a very similar island ecosystem? And when considering this, is it a close genetic form? Is that good enough to consider okay to bring back to Lord Howe Island? Is there support from the community? This is essential, and this was played out a little bit with the rodent eradication, where the scientists running the program were not really aware of the dynamics of a small island community. So it needs to get support from the community for everybody to be engaged and be part of it. And it also needs sufficient funding to ensure that the necessary research can be done and the reintroductions be done very, very thoroughly. And from answers of these sorts of questions, draw up a priority list with the order of species to be introduced and develop a detailed plan. And there we are. And I wasn't watching the clock, so I'm not sure how we're going for time, Barry.
You were pretty close, Ian. Thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. We've got a few minutes for questions. Would anyone like to ask questions of Ian? Feel free to unmute and speak up.
Barry, it's Elizabeth Hodgson here. Could I ask Ian, do you think it's really necessary to consider any more reintroductions? Could you not just say we've got everything that we need and leave it at that?
I think in considering the full functioning of the ecosystem, it should be looked at. Some of these birds, particularly I mentioned that pigeon, where it could be transporting some of the bigger seeded plants around the island, and without that process, then those seeds are just dropping below the tree and not travelling far. That's one of the examples of just how to consider what role these birds may have played in the ecosystem. And then the one that I mentioned with the phasmids ate rainforest leaves on the island at night, and it may be that the boobook owl that we had here was predating on that and keeping the numbers in check, and without a predator, the phasmid numbers may increase and start to destroy the rainforest. So these sorts of questions need to be asked in conjunction with the bird reintroductions.
Ian, David Marquardt, I'm absolutely fascinated by that almost exponential growth of the woodhens over the last few years. Are there any hypotheses on what potential impact might be that are negative consequences of that kind of growth in such a small environment?
Well, I think what we're seeing in the last 5 years, and it'll probably continue for at least another 10 years, is the resetting of Lord Howe Island to how the ecosystem functioned 300 years ago before humans came. So nobody alive knows how many woodhens were on the island prior to humans. We're just seeing that now. And it is a question a lot of people ask coming to the island: what is the maximum number of woodhens, or the optimal number? And my answer is the ecosystem will sort it out without rats predating on insects, beetles, snails, fruits. The woodhen numbers are increasing because of that extra food. We're also seeing the woodhens seeking even more protein. I've seen woodhens eating sooty tern eggs and pulling a unhatched sooty tern chick out of the egg. I've seen woodhens going down mutton bird burrows. So the woodhens are seeking protein from everywhere, and this is the sort of thing that probably did go on for many thousands of years prior to humans. From the human perspective, some of the people on the island are a bit put out because the woodhens do come into the gardens and rip up vegetables they're trying to grow and a few things like that. But that's just a minor issue. So does that sort of answer your question?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ian. We've just about run out of time in this segment. That was fascinating, and thank you so much for your presentation.